Perhaps you had better start from the beginning. I always remember that line from the White Zombie song Electric Head from the classic Astrocrete 2000. And even back then I knew it was from the Hammer film Curse of Frankenstein. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen. This week we are doing another movie review. This is The Curse of Frankenstein from the legendary Hammer films. Now, this was the film that put Hammer on the map as far as the horror genre goes. And this was the first Hammer horror film to be in color. And the film just looks glorious. It looks fantastic, beautiful colors, and that beautiful, awesome gothic look that Hammer is so well known for. And I don't think it's ever been done better than it has been in this movie, The Curse of Frankenstein, starring the legendary Peter Cushing in the vital role of Victor Frankenstein. And he would go on to play that role several times throughout the franchise. And of course you had Christopher Lee as the creature. Look at that awesome, grotesque makeup design. I absolutely love it. Back then we had never really seen anything like that, you know. So awesome. And the film also features Hazel Court in the role of Elizabeth, Robert Urquhart in the role of Dr. Paul Krempe, and Valerie Gaunt in the role of Justine the maid. And Valerie Gaunt was also in The Horror of Dracula as Vampire Woman. So it's kind of cool to see her in this film as well. And yeah, I just absolutely love this. I think it's absolutely one of the best Hammer horror films ever. So The Curse of Frankenstein begins with, you know, this priest goes to visit this man in the jail, in the prison. And I love the intro about it, how it's like they really build up to it. He meets this guard, and the guard's like, "Are you sure you want to talk to this man? This man is raving." And really, he just goes to meet Victor Frankenstein, and Victor's just sitting there, you know, and he's distraught, and he is kind of kooky and kind of wacky, but I'd hardly say he's just totally bats, you know. But at any rate, Victor meets up with this priest, and this priest, I guess, is very respected throughout the community. So Victor feels if he tells this man his story, his wild story, maybe he can explain it to the townsfolk and get them to understand, get them to empathize with him, you know, and let them know that he's actually a good guy, that he was just trying to do things in the name of science to progress science along further, you know. That's his intention. That things just got haywire, you know. So he begins to tell the classic story of Frankenstein, you know, that we all know from the classic novel of Mary Shelley. And of course they take their own liberties in the film, but, you know, and it's not like a replica of the Universal classic Frankenstein. There are similarities, of course, but it's not like a note-by-note, you know, remake of that. They definitely put their own Hammer stamp on this film, big time. So what happens is we meet young Victor Frankenstein when he's just a kid, and apparently he inherited the estate, and he inherited all the money from his father. His father, I guess, was a very rich man in the community. So now it's up to him to carry on the Frankenstein name. And he meets up with his aunt, who his father, I guess, supported all her life, and her young daughter Elizabeth, who we meet later on in the film as a grown-up, beautiful, gorgeous woman, you know. So Victor says, "Yeah, I'm going to continue to support you. Don't worry, I'm going to continue to support you and your family." So later on, Elizabeth kind of feels, you know, betrothed to him because he supported her whole life, you know. And but what happens is young Victor meets up with a tutor, a man who worked with his father, a very established professor, a very brilliant scientist, a brilliant doctor, to teach him all the ways of science. And he's by the name of Dr. Paul Krempe. So Dr. Paul Krempe comes to visit the young Baron Frankenstein. And he's already a really brilliant kid. He's really smart, really well-spoken. So it doesn't take him long to become a brilliant scientist. So him and Dr. Paul Krempe work together on these really intense experiments. And things get so far that they end up bringing a dog back from the dead. So it's like, wow. And so they're really happy about that. You believe this is just the beginning. We have only scratched the surface of what needs to be done, you know. So Victor wants to create new life. That's how far he wants to go with it. So in doing so, he starts robbing graves and stuff. And along the way, Dr. Paul Krempe is kind of like, you know, what is this guy doing? Is he crazy? You know, he's digging up graves and taking people's body parts and putting them all together. What is this guy doing? And he's got these horrors going on, you know. I can't be a part of this. I won't be a part of it, you know. And he really struggles with it. But he's a brilliant scientist himself, and he can understand to an extent what Victor is trying to do, because he's trying to make advances in the name of science, but he's going way too far with it. And, you know, he's got to kind of dismiss himself from it, and he tries to. And what happens is Peter Cushing, you know, he's robbing the graves. His idea is to put together a new life, you know, a new person, a man. He wants to build a man from parts of dead corpses, you know, like the hands of a sculptor, the brain of a brilliant professor, who Peter Cushing actually ends up killing, you know, just so he could take his brain and put it in the monster that he's created. So yeah, it's crazy. It's so awesome, though. Peter Cushing is absolutely brilliant in this film. He's just madcap genius. I love it. I just love his role in the film. He plays, I think, the best version of Victor Frankenstein that's ever been, you know. I would say Victor Frankenstein is played by Peter Cushing is the best to ever play that character. So yes, what happens is the experiments go crazy. So Dr. Victor Frankenstein has built this monster made of the hands of the sculptor and the eyes of a maniac and the brain of a professor, so he could be a brilliant guy, you know. What happens, though, is the brain gets damaged along the way. Him and Dr. Krempe get in a little scuffle, and the brain ends up being damaged. So, and Dr. Victor Frankenstein just flips out and like, "You damn it, the brain!" But he ends up going through it anyway. But and then along the way, we meet Elizabeth as a grown woman. Like I said, she's just drop-dead gorgeous, and she comes to live with the Baron Victor Frankenstein. Like I said, she kind of feels obligated to him, kind of betrothed, but at the same time she has had dreams about getting married to a rich, wealthy man, and you know, Victor Frankenstein's a good-looking guy, you know. So she decides to marry Dr. Frankenstein, but she's kind of really naive. She doesn't really have any clue, any inkling of what's going on behind the scenes with Victor up in his laboratory. She has no idea the horrors that he's involved in, you know. And Dr. Krempe tries to let her know about that. He tries to warn her, you know, you gotta leave, you gotta get out of here. This guy's, you have no idea the horrors that he's creating, you know. And yeah, she's just totally naive. You're crazy, you know, he's a wonderful man, you know. And she's so beautiful, so well-spoken, so beautifully dressed, but she just has no idea what's going on. And Victor actually has a girl on the side, you know, Justine, who's like the maid. He's got an affair going on with her. I think he gets her pregnant, you know. So he's like a two-timer. And the funny thing is, Elizabeth is his cousin. They never say, like, how weird that is in the movie. Like, this is his cousin. His first cousin, too. It's almost like incest. But at any rate, we do see the creature create, and it's such an awesome scene, the way they build up to it in the laboratory with the creaking machines and the fans and the, you know, all the laboratory experiments. It's awesome the way they do it. I love it. you got that science fiction aspect in there as well, you know. And I love that part of it. And I always love that about the Frankenstein story, you know, how it mixes kind of the science fiction aspect, the mad scientist thing, with the horror, you know. And this film does that beautifully. And, yeah, once the creature is born, you know, he's that classic monster that's just lives off of basic animal instincts, really. He doesn't have the intelligence that the professor had because that brain got damaged, of course. So he's just kind of a wild, you know, maniac, uncontrollable, you know. And he escapes and terrorizes the town, you know, and it's that classic Frankenstein story, and it's just a great, great film. With, like I said, awesome effects on the monster, and Christopher Lee does an absolutely excellent portrayal of the creature. And, you know, we see an emotional side to the creature as well. He has a hard time relating to things. And we see him, he's like a fish out of water, you know, that classic fish out of water story. He doesn't know how to move right, really, even. You know, he doesn't know how to sit down right, really. He's just working off of basic animal instincts. And he meets this guy once he escapes the laboratory. He's a blind old man. At first he's kind of like struck with him, but, you know, he kind of freaks out. He can't handle it, and he ends up, you know, killing the man, you know. So Victor and Paul catch up with him, and they shoot him, you know, in the head, and it's like, and he dies. But of course, Victor has other plans. You know, his plan is to bring the monster back to life. So he's never going to stop. Victor is never going to stop. So he doesn't care how much damage the monster does, or the havoc that he creates. Or he doesn't even care if the monster gets at Elizabeth, you know. All he cares about is the advancement of science and his crazy experiments. And, yeah, I love it. Victor's almost kind of a bad guy in a way, you know. He'll do anything in the name of science, you know. And that's one of the things I love about Curse of Frankenstein. It's absolutely one of the greatest Hammer horror films ever. Absolutely love it. So, guys, definitely check out The Curse of Frankenstein, directed by Terence Fisher, starring the legendary Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, as well as Hazel Court. Just an awesome Hammer horror film. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.